Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we discuss my thoughts on episode 9 of the anime series恋は雨上がりのように, or Love is Like After the Rain. And what this episode most, sort of embodies to me is the idea of the ebb and flow of life and living. How people come into your life and go out of it again, and sometimes they follow back around and come back into your life at some point. Sometimes they're gone forever, that kind of thing. This episode truly characterizes that with the dichotomy, going on between Tachibana and Haruka, as well as Kondo and his literary friend, who did not, prove to be, as was very rife for speculation in the comments and the discussion on some of my previous videos. It did not turn out to be Kondo's wife, his estranged wife, which was the supposition. In a lot of the conversations, even I myself, I thought that's the likeliest candidate for who this might be, for why he was so sort of downtrodden about it when he took the book out of the library and whatever like that. And but no, it turned out to be an old classmate of Kondo's. And so you see the reforging of that old friendship, that old alliance, going back to his, all of his being sort of consumed with nostalgia and that aspect of youth that he feels that he's lost and moved so far beyond. And all the while, you have Tachibana and Haruka, they've gone to this festival. And it was kind of surprising to me that we picked up with it at all to begin with. I'd kind of just taken it for granted that when we saw the end of the previous episode, we'd skip ahead again by the time this episode came around. It would be like a week later. But no, we pick up right there where that episode ended with Haruka meeting Tachibana, and we find out she dragged her brother and I guess little sisters along. And they were kind of adorable. And the way they all start crying when the minced words are starting to come to light between Tachibana and Haruka, which itself was surprising. This is something that goes back to my own speculation back when, I called attention to it in my previous episode discussion video, the episode wherein Haruka had gotten the little keychain ornament for Tachibana, in answer to her desire, her hopes and wishes to forge some sort of, relationship with Kondo. She had wanted that little sort of, prize keychain ornament because supposedly if you got it, it would grant your wish, that kind of thing. And so she hoped this would give her a leg up in forging more bonds between she and Kondo, opening him much more up to her and her want to know more about him. And, but even then she had taken out of the library a book of photography to do with track running and runners. And there was some trepidation on my part, which I believe if I didn't voice in that exact video, I did in the conversation that followed in the comments with you guys, that I just wasn't sure she had successfully worked beyond, her whatever was holding her back, her reservations, her lack of being able to, put herself into running anymore, and how that might be hard for her to sort of maneuver around that friendship of old with Haruka, who could still very much pursue it and such like that. And lo and behold, that ends up being the case. I mean, I'm smacked right upside the head with it in the way this transpires in this episode. And I didn't feel, it was a situation where I wasn't happy for having been right. The previous episode was calming and relaxing, very happy. The idea of them, reforging their friendship and going to this festival together. It was a really happy, heartwarming way to end that previous episode. So when we get into this one, the pacing of it, the doling out of they're sort of featuring their own nostalgia as they go and they try to pick up, balloons out of the water, whatever it was, bean bags or balloons, and play the games of old and get the snacks of old that they remember. And it starts, the conversation starts to revolve around, well, this is really the first time we've hung out since I quit the track team. And they're both sort of understated in their being happy about that. But of course, as time mulls on and pushes forward, they will eventually get around to the idea, because she runs into Kondo and his son right then and there. And Haruka being perceptive, having been so closely connected with Tachibana, she can tell via her demeanor, via her, blushing cheeks, that there's more going on when she goes up to just pseudo say hi to them, and she pointedly asks Tachibana, do you like him? And it was full of surprises, this whole sequence, because I'm more used to anime characters, tiptoeing through eggshells, not getting around to the thing they want to say with the immediacy with which they want to say it. The minced words routine and whatever like that. And so I was surprised that Haruka just came out with it. But this was the tipping point. This was the point where she finally was able to reveal her frustrations collectively that have, built up in the time that they haven't talked to each other. In that time they haven't spoken, there's been a divide, a very divisiveness to their friendship, to the point where Tachibana has largely closed Haruka off. Now, I think, there is some of that still very much harkens back to the fact that Tachibana, as I have speculated, she would look upon Haruka and see someone who can still pursue the thing she can no longer pursue, that still has the passion for it to match her own, but one of them is forever going to be lacking, that being Tachibana, because she can't pursue it anymore. She has the injury. It will be a complete and utter stoppage for all time in the pursuit of that passion, and here my best friend can still do it. In fact, she may not have even wanted to be a track runner were it not for my passion being all-consuming and rubbing off on her. So I think there's a large portion of that speaks to that divide, that speaks to the reservations, the closed-offishness of Tachibana to Haruka, and Haruka finally comes to bear as a tried and true friend. Why won't you talk to me? Why won't you reveal things to me? Why are you so closed off to me? We didn't used to be that way. And it was heartbreaking and, again, very utmost surprising. There were surprises every other line of dialogue in this entire sequence, especially when Haruka's younger brother and their little baby sisters catch up with them again. And Tachibana just plain statedly says, we can't go back to the way we were. It's just not going to work. It's not going to happen. Now, in that moment, she fell silent, and of course Haruka, burst into tears and was all out crying and eventually would run off, leading her brother and the two baby sisters to run behind her, and Tachibana was there left by her lonesome. She successfully closed herself off again. And for just a fleeting moment when she said, we can never go back to the way we used to be, a sort of internal voice to my own mind was like, but you don't need to be. You don't need to go back to that. We can still be friends anew. We can have a new kind of relationship, friendship, whatever, We don't necessarily have to try to recapture exactly what once was. It's impossible. It's incapable. So you grow and you evolve, and you let that friendship, that relationship, that dynamic grow and evolve with you. But a lot of what was being said here was holdover, things that had gone unspoken that needed to be said, lines drawn in the sand and all, for them both to be able to move on. This was baggage that needed to be excised in order for their progression. And whether that progression means growing apart and forever separating, or growing apart temporarily and coming back to each other once again at some point, remains to be seen. It's just, again, the ebb and flow of life and living. It's just c'est la vie, such is life, the way it goes. And so I was captivated and heartbroken and shocked and surprised by this entire sequence. And then we focus over on to Kondo, who, as I say, catches up with his old classmate. He's sort of on a little bit of a nostalgia trip, going to this one part of town where they used to hang out when they were in school. And, the bookstore shouldn't be closed already, but it was closed early. Well, I'll just sort of check things out, kill some time, find my way to where I'm meeting my buddy. And it seemed very much like the buddy probably frequents the place, because it seemed like a lot of the people there, if not recognized him for being the author of the book that Kondo had taken out of the library, at least they seemed to be reactionary to their conversation, like how is this guy being disrespectful to our boy, to our the author? you know, the guy who's in here every night or every once in a while. We know him. We recognize his face. And this you know, chuffed up loser comes walking in, Kondo, and he's mouthing off back and forth. What gives? You know, that's kind of the vibe vaguely that I was getting from the crowd when you know, the sort of shouting back and forth was going on between Kondo and his buddy. Two schoolgirls were leaving just as Kondo got there, and they had gotten an autograph from the writer. Is his name Chihiro? I think that's what it was, but I'm being a little forgetful. I forgot to jot it down, you know, in the hopes of memorizing it, but the whole aspect of reclaiming that nostalgia. And after 10 years, it's interesting because I found myself very personally relating to a lot of what Kondo was going through. As far as being an aspiring writer, I've been an aspiring writer since I was in school. For the last better part of the last decade, I've kind of fallen away from it. In the time that I've been on YouTube, I've definitely, you know, I've sort of turned and focused my creative juices onto doing these discussions and having these discussions and all the videos that I've made. And for a want to pursue that, there has been a lacking in keeping up with my aspiring writing, you know, that kind of thing. So when Kondo is sort of downtrodden over the fact that, hey, my old buddy, he's successful, he's published, I could relate to that. When Kondo talks about, well, I haven't really done a whole hell of a lot of writing. I write a little bit here and there. I don't really tell anyone about it. It's just kind of my own personal thing. I could relate to that. The idea of his not having been in contact with his friend for the better part of the last decade. I could relate to that in a similarity between my cousin and I, which I talked about in a recent video to do with what got me into the Final Fantasy gaming franchise. I related the story that my cousin and I, who were very close friends in childhood, we had gotten to the point where, much as is the case with Tachibana and Haruka in this episode, and as was the case with Kondo and his author buddy, you know, we fell out of love with each other, and it took 10 years to pass before we would be reunited sort of inadvertently by our grandparents and such like that. And we found that we were fast friends anew all over again. And he's like a brother from another mother, as I describe him. And so I so could relate to all of the things that were going on with Kondo. And I think it speaks to the idea of, you know, again, reforging a friendship is something people can relate to from time to time, but especially losing friendships and a divide growing between us and someone we care about. This is something that speaks to life and living, that speaks to something we all can relate to. We all have at one time or another experienced. And if you haven't experienced it yet, chances are you still will at some point. And there's never a time where it isn't heartbreaking. There's never a time where it isn't frustrating, and there's never a time where it's something you least expect to actually have happen, to actually have to endure. But it's just, that is the craft of this story. That is the perfection with which it is directed and plotted and paced and written and characterized by not only the animation but the voice acting involved. I truly felt the friendship of old that was there between Kondo and his writer buddy. And even though I'm not somebody who drinks or you know, gets drunk or anything like that, it was somewhat comical how they very much conformed back to that old estimation of that playful but still poking jabs relationship between them on their walk home. And the writer buddy doesn't want to have to walk. He wants to take the cab and everything. And all of the mocks going back and forth. It was pleasant and it was engaging. And it was a much needed sort of pick me up to where the first half of the episode left me emotionally, with the heartbreaking, you know, scenario of Tachibana and Haruka coming to verbal blows, coming to a much-needed impasse where they really had to be able to position themselves in, you know, such a way that they could engage and discuss and refocus where they're going to be directing themselves. And it was that much sweeter when, you know, Tachibana is back at work and Kondo, at first he thinks, oh, you know, it must not have anything to do with me, Yoshizawa or something like that isn't in work today. Maybe she's down about that. He's completely still in denial or obtuse. But I once again, I was pleasantly surprised, much as I was with the confrontational characterization of Haruka when she had noticed that Tachibana, had an interest in Kondo at the festival. There were no minced words between Kondo and Tachibana toward the end of the episode. They were cut off briefly, but once they had gotten back together, she was taking out the trash. He very much, in an almost fatherly sort of, tack, and in a mentorish sort of tack, his imparting words, he points out the supermoon, the moon above, and he relates his own tale to her after she finally commits to the truth of the matter and reveals that she and her friend, her old track friend, without even really saying that, Kondo's observations of, her injury and such lead him to fill in the plot holes, which she doesn't say. So he's right there in step with her as she's saying, my friend and I, we're sort of on different paths. We've sort of had a falling out. And I love how he relates that story and how they relate to each other, and it was just very sweet. I mean, it didn't have to be bang over your head romantic. They don't have to be lovey-dovey, hugging and kissing and all this kind of stuff, which seems to have been the long-standing want for Tachibana. But in this episode, it was very intriguingly downplayed. She had a concern for other things. Kondo was not in this episode the subject, the number one thing that she set her focus is upon. She wanted to reconnect and reforge the friendship with Haruka. She had sort of been surprised to see Kondo and his son at the festival, so just took an aside, but she came right back to Haruka, and she really genuinely wanted that to be able to be workable again. And so when you leave off with the episode where Kondo has said, the super moon means you wish upon it, and whatever you wish will come true, and she wishes with the utmost of sincerity that she and Haruka can work beyond this, can find each other again. And it just really warmed my heart again. I mean, this episode, the entirety of it was a roller coaster ride of surprises, twists, turns, emotional elements, frustrations, being heartbroken, being sad, being surprised, as I say, and then sort of the levity of, Kondo's reforging that friendship of old for himself with the nostalgia surrounding it, and finding out that they were part of like a literary club. They had their own self-published magazine, and he would have arguments with the other guy about movie reviews. Oh, gee, how one relates in this YouTube social media vein, talking about movies. And, well, I love that movie. I hate that movie. I hate you. Such like that. You're an idiot if you didn't like that movie. Well, you're an idiot if you did. And all of that. The commentary on life and living, the ebb and flow of humanity, of the human experience, was utmost the center sort of element to all of the plotting of this episode. And once again, this proves to be second to none my favorite series of this current unfolding anime season. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of episode 9 of Koi wa Ameagari no yo ni, or Love is Like After the Rain, if you've seen it as well, if you enjoyed it as much as I did, got as much, profound sort of insight and emotional impact, highs and lows out of it as I did. If not, why not? Let me know that in the comments below. Love it or hate it, anything goes, as long as we have a great conversation. And if you found this episode in any way lacking, I'd love to hear as to why. So yeah, otherwise it'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch y'all later. Peace.